All right, one last item in your repertoire of weapons to argue against evolution and for a young creation. Dust on the moon. Assumption has been made without proof of a billion-year-plus-year universe pervades most of the explanations of the amount of dust recently discovered on the moon. These particular explanations are as yet largely unsubstantiated. The conclusions drawn are often widely conflicting. Even it's just like shooting from the hip, no scientific observations or experimentation. Even when from the same research firm, contradicts itself all the time, and cover a very short period of time of observation of evidence. Thus, they lack sufficient evidence to develop strong, reliable scientific conclusions. Furthermore, many of the research efforts produce substantial differences due to varying methodology and sources of information. Satellite measurements of dust influx, analyses of moon rock soil samples, earth dust influx collections, moon microcraters found on the moon rocks, micrometeor impacts on command module windows, and so on. And these efforts consistently ignored the possibility that the moon is not billions, but only thousands of years old, which evidence so far would support. Finally, a number of research papers did include, before any Apollo mission, that there indeed would be a substantial amount of meteoric dust on the moon, a substantial amount, also based on insufficient evidence as yet. So they predicted this. I don't know how you can predict something and call it scientific. To conclude, none of the explanations which offered a billion-plus-year-old moon as being supported brought forth any consideration of the possibility that the moon is young. They just, well, that's out of the question. We're just going to argue anything against it. And they make up stuff. That's what they did. Evolution is make up stuff to argue against creation and God. They assumed from the outset that it was billions of years old and weighed the evidence on the light of this presupposition for which the research was being done to conclude in the first place. Sound like circular reasons? Dr. Baugh states, the moon is receding from the Earth a few inches each year. If you extend time back many tens of thousands of years, this means that the moon would have been so close to the Earth that all of Earth's continents would be covered with water twice a day. How about that tide, incoming tide, right? You better hide underneath the water until the tide goes back out, and then you go outside and walk around, thus eliminating the possibility of earthbound life forms until just recently. Again, this shows that everything was meticulously and artistically designed. It was orchestrated at the beginning. When astronauts landed on the moon, however, there was discovered far less dust on the surface than expected, inches instead of feet, only enough to account for thousands of years of existence, certainly not millions or more. Later theoretical efforts by evolutionists to explain that the dust compacted into soil over time falls short of explaining why only a few inches of actual dust was found and not much more, as it supposedly was gradually being compacted into soil over millions of years. I mean, that's an absurd explanation for an absurdity. How much dust and meteoric debris should the moon have if it is? The moon is 4.6 billion years old. That's the question. Well, we went to this study here at creationscience.com. 1981, I had a conversation with Dr. Herbert Zook of the U.S. Nautical Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. He had been intimately involved in estimating the thickness of the dust layer on the moon before the first Apollo moon landing, because that was important. They were worried that when the Apollo landed, it would land and be swallowed up by dust. They thought of so much of it. He also helped analyze the lunar material brought back from the moon. Of the many interesting things he told me and sent me by mail, one is critical in answering the above question. NASA did not realize until the moon dust and rocks were analyzed that only 1 part in 67, 1.5%, of the debris on the moon came from outer space. The rest was pulverized moon rock. In hindsight, this makes perfect sense. Meteorites that strike the moon travel about 7 times faster than a bullet, averaging about 20 kilometers per second. When they strike the moon, they are not slowed down by an atmosphere as on Earth, because the moon has no atmosphere. And therefore, the projectile, regardless of size, instantaneously vaporizes and kicks up a cloud of pulverized moon rock. The vaporized meteorite then condenses on the pulverized moon rocks. This was determined by slicing moon rocks and finding them coated by meteoric material rich in nickel. Uncoated moon rocks have practically no nickel. In this way, NASA arrived at the factor of 67.2. So, you ask again, I can get this a little bigger here, there you go. How much meteoritic material is striking the moon? More specifically, how many particles, N, greater than a certain mass, M, pass through a square meter on the moon's surface each second. This is called the cumulative flux. The data is usually reported on a coordinate system as shown in figure 68, which we'll look at. Logarithmic scales are used because so many more smaller particles strike the moon than larger ones. So, the range of particle sizes is large, big range. Most particles smaller than this amount here, 10 to the 13th gram, are blown out of the solar system by solar wind. At the other extreme are the large crater-forming meteorites. Measurements exist for the influx of meteoritic material in 3 regions across this broad range. The first, which will be called region A, the second, C, and the third, the last, will be called point E. Regions B and D are interpolated between those known religions and are shown as the blue dashed lines in figure 68. So, let me just get up and take my chicken out of the oven. Be right back. Hopefully I didn't forget to take the feathers off the chicken. You do that once in a while? It's hard to chew feathers. Did you miss me? This way I can get my quota of YouTubes done each day. I like to do 3. It gets me involved in the studying and review of my studies and research that I've done over the years. In any case, the range of particle sizes is large. We have A and C and the last E. Regions B and D are interpolated between these known regions and are shown in the blue dashed lines in figure 68. Hopefully, I don't know if I took a picture of figure 68. So region A has this number of particles. Size meters placed on the moon provided the data for C. The results were NC is the number of particles per square meter and so on. It's all scientific stuff. Let's see what the conclusions are. All right. I'm looking at the numbers. So the task now is to integrate the total mass of meteoritic material that they've measured. And they give you all these scientific formulae. If you're scientists, check these out. I'm not. Just looking for the conclusions. So the ratio of the pulverized moon rocks to meteoritic material was 67. The table 10, which we're going to look at, gives the calculated values for the various thicknesses. All right, it's all Greek to me, or mathematics. Now let's have a discussion on this. The lunar surface is composed of a powdery soil, an inch or so thick, below which is 4 to 10 meters of regolith. Regolith is a range of material from fine dust up to blocks that are several meters across. Meteoritic bombardment, in forming a crater, overturns and mixes this soil regolith, each time coating the outer surfaces with very thin layers of condensed meteoritic material. Going how many times faster than a bullet, it impacts that moon surface with no atmosphere. That's almost like a bomb. The expected thickness of the soil regolith in table 10 assumed 4.6, 10 to the 9th billion years of bombardment, wow, yeah, at only today's rate, exceeds it by about 50 times its actual thickness. Furthermore, most of the calculated thickness comes from region D. All right. We assume that the influx of meteoric material for these A, B, and C has always been what it is today. That's an assumption. Obviously, as time has passed, the influx has decreased enormously because moons and planets sweep it up or expel it beyond the Earth-Moon neighborhood. Only point E did not have that assumption. Point E is based on meteorites we know struck the moon sometime in the past. Okay, I'm looking for the conclusions here. Several people have published attempts to answer this question in a technical note. All right, conclusion. Hey, okay. The above calculations cast serious doubt on the prevailing opinion that the meteoric material and craters on the moon accumulated over 4.6 billion years. In other words, the moon better be a lot younger, right? Otherwise, the evidence doesn't show that it's old. Several other explanations can also be addressed. Could there have been a steady rain of meteoritic material over only 10,000 years, which we don't measure? If the above calculations are repeated, the expected thickness of lunar regolith and soil becomes about 23 meters. This number is also too large, although not as much as 315 meters calculated above. We have inches, and we're talking about meters. Therefore, the steady rate of meteoritic material idea is probably wrong, even over a short time interval. Could the bombardment of the moon have been an event rather than a steady rain? If we calculate just material contributed by the 125 largest impacts, assuming the impactors were meteorites, we find that the thickness of the lunar regolith should be about 299 meters. Lots of meters instead of inches. Obviously too large. How about just a few inches is what we found? The author's conclusion is that the impactors were comets, not meteorites. Comets are large, dirty snowballs or muddy icebergs. Their water content would have vaporized and escaped the moon long ago. What was the source of so many comets? Probably it was the fountains of the great deep, which would have expelled large volumes of muddy water into elliptical solar orbits, fountains of the great deep on the Earth. This water would have quickly frozen and become comets. Much more will be said about this surprising proposal at a later time. So, it's far greater was expected of moon dust and only inches. So the moon, obviously younger, far younger. So the flux is about 1 order of magnitude less than the average integrated flux over the past 3 aeons, calculated on the basis of crater counts on young lunar Maria surfaces. Okay. So the moon is young. The existence of comets supports a recently created universe. Comets. They circle the sun and are shown to be as old as our solar system. Since they are continually disintegrating and a number unknown to have broken up, evidently all of them self-destruct within a relatively short time period. It is estimated that the comets cannot be over 10,000 years old. Comet water. Comets are primarily composed of water. So many small comets strike the Earth that if our planet was billions of years old, our oceans would be filled several times over with water. The origin and age of comets is even more obscure than that of meteorites. Fred Whipple, who has contributed more to the theory of cometary phenomena than most other modern astronomers, says, "We are still left in the dark as to the ultimate origin of comets. Where was the factory in which they were made located? And when did the sun acquire this magnificent assemblage of quite trivial bodies whose combined total mass, in spite of their vast extent, is probably less than that of the Earth?" The interesting thing about comets is that they seem to be disintegrating continuously. A number of them have broken up and dissipated within the period of human observation. Evidently, all the known comets can be expected to break up and vanish within a time which is geologically very short. There you go, young comets. It has been estimated that the breakup of many comets has taken place at such a rate that they will be entirely disrupted within 1,000,000 years. It is an immediate inference that these comets cannot have been moving around the sun as they are at present for much longer than 1,000,000 years, since otherwise it would already have been broken up. Since comets are very definitely apart